It's Monday morning, and this morning I'm off to pilot school, being sent for retraining by the Civil Aviation Authority after my third airspace infringement. So I'll give you the story of that. There aren't very many things you can easily get into trouble for when you're flying privately, but one of them, obviously for me, because I've done it 3 times, is infringing controlled airspace, or infringing airspace of one kind or another that you shouldn't be infringing. For those of you who aren't pilots, infringing controlled airspace is the thing that's most likely to get you into hot water with the Civil Aviation Authority. And my first one was in, I think, June 2017. And it's amazing because in the first 10 years of having my PPL, I never had an airspace infringement or was even aware of coming close to one. And I suppose that's partly why, as a particular danger, it had sort of gradually receded on my radar of things to worry about. And that was a very subtle, sort of just a slight bounce off Solent Class D airspace when I was flying from Blackbush down to Bournemouth one day. And that wasn't a flight planning mistake, that was an in-flight mistake, because it was the first time for me. I had been flying a Cessna 182 with an autopilot, a wing leveler, for most of my flights leading up to that day. And that particular day was my first flight back in the Cessna 172 that didn't have an autopilot, and my route drifted to the left, and I just infringed controlled airspace. And I didn't know what was going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen. It was the first time I've been told over the radio, you've entered controlled airspace. After my first airspace infringement, the owner of the aircraft got an email from the CAA. They forwarded it to me. And I can remember being absolutely terrified because I didn't know what was going to happen. And I remember talking to a really experienced pilot and explaining to him what had happened. And his advice was advice I didn't take, because he said, go and refly the route with Skydemon and make sure you get really close but don't actually infringe it, and then use that as your evidence that you didn't infringe, which I didn't do. I'm glad I didn't do it. I'm really glad I didn't do it for lots of reasons. I answered the questionnaire the Civil Aviation Authority gave me, and I received a response saying, okay, it was effectively right, that's your first offence. Please be more careful, please don't do it again. We'll keep your record on file, but we'll take no further action this time. Okay, so I was relieved, and I became more cautious. Toasted bacon and fried egg sarnie. Just what you want before you're going off to Top Gun. Pilot school. Top Gun. I've got images in my mind of walking into a military classroom full of naval aviators and the instructor saying, gentlemen, you're the elite. No, how does the line go? The best of the best, but we're here to make you better. So yeah, I'm going to entertain myself by imagining that I'm in the Top Gun classroom this morning, rather than in pilot detention, which is a bit what it feels. That's not true, I know, and I'm being silly. I'm looking forward to seeing what I can learn this morning and seeing how I can improve my planning, my pilot skills, my situational awareness, and how I can further reduce the chances of making another airspace infringement, because I don't want to do that. I really don't. I want that third one to be my last one ever. My next airspace infringement wasn't for another 3 years. It was just after I got this plane. My second airspace infringement was absolutely inexcusable. It was a planning failure. It was a situational awareness failure. Complacency crept in. It was on a route. I was flying from Dunkerswell up to Earl's Colne to pick up a family member, and I flew. It was a perpendicular bust straight into Heathrow airspace. It was the base dropped down to 2,500 feet, and I flew in at 3,000 feet. I was on Farnborough radar with a listening squawk, and Farnborough immediately contacted me and let me know. And I was probably only in controlled airspace for 30 seconds, I should think. No more than 30, 45 seconds until I descended and I was below it again. And again, I didn't know what was going to happen, but I quite soon after that received a letter from the CAA. And this time, they asked me to do an airspace infringement awareness course. This was during 2020, so during COVID lockdown. And I have to say, I can't believe that course that I did is not part of doing a PPL. I actually recorded a video at the time that I put on a Facebook group, and I'll insert a clip of it here. In the UK, every year, there are 30,000 commercial aircraft that are affected by airspace infringements that are almost all caused by general aviation aircraft.
And it seemed like an astonishingly large number until the chap doing the training explained that something else I did not know, that if you infringe controlled airspace and you are not on the frequency so they can't talk to you, the ATC are required to create an immediate bubble around the uncleared aircraft of 5 miles horizontally and 5,000 feet vertically. The things that I learned on that airspace infringement awareness course made me so compelled, convinced, persuaded to really make sure that I never, ever, ever again infringed airspace. And I really, and I have actually, ever since that time, taken it much more seriously in my planning and in my flying. The course cost 80 or 90 quid. It was done online by video. And actually, I'll share a link to it because I think there's an online presentation. I'll try and see if I can find a link to it. If that's the case, and you'll probably see from that Facebook video clip I just put in, the number of people that it puts out, the number of people it puts at risk, people's jobs at risk, people's inconvenience, it was remarkable. I didn't understand the immediate consequences on ATC of people who infringe airspace. Having made that commitment to myself that I was never going to infringe airspace again, how come it happened a third time? The thing I'm really curious to find out today at my ground school training is whether or not I feel I come away actually having learned something new, having perhaps grown a skill. My worry is that actually the CAA haven't been very clear with the flight school as to exactly what ground school they're expecting to provide me with. I totally accept and embrace the concept of being sent for retraining when you've demonstrated a lack of training in your flying. So I've got no objection whatsoever to being sent for this training. What I'm less sure about is how well coordinated the actual training is between the CAA and the flight school. Okay, my infringement, the whole thing is recorded in one of my videos. I'll link to the video here. It was a really particularly stressful flight. I think that's even the title of the video. I was flying from Dunkeswell to a private farm strip in Sussex along the south coast. And the weather was a bit worse than forecast. The cloud bases were worse and it was a bit of a scud run. But I was on to Bournemouth radar at the time that it happened, although the infringement itself was actually the Lee on Solent ATZ. And here's the moment right now when it happened. So there's Lee on Solent down there, and if you can see that.
Number 200, Bournemouth.
Number 200.
Given your level and range, I'm going to lose you off radio shortly. Do you want to try Goodwood or Farnborough?
Now, as you can see from that video clip, I was apparently oblivious of the fact that I had infringed airspace. It was actually someone on Facebook was the first person to comment on the video saying, you just flew straight into Lee on Solent's ATZ. And what it transpires is, it was complete ignorance on my part. I did not, in my mind, subconsciously, I did not treat an aerodrome ATZ in the same way as I treat Class D or A or B or C controlled airspace. In my mind, it wasn't controlled airspace, and therefore it wasn't to be avoided with such caution as controlled airspace. I was wrong, guys. You cannot fly into an aerodrome ATZ without talking to them on the radio. Now, it's not controlled airspace. You aren't receiving any kind of service when you do fly into an ATZ, but you are supposed to at least make a blind radio call, I think. And I think perhaps just a blind radio call might have, I'll find out. I'm doing my ground school, which has happened as a result, as a consequence of this infringement. The CAA wrote to me in November and have asked me to do some ground school and some 3 hours of flight training on navigation. But I just wanted to share, the most important comment I'd make is this. At no point in any of these 3 infringements have the CAA made me feel anything other than they are trying to help reduce instances of infringements, they're trying to increase awareness, they're trying to improve pilot training. And especially after the second one, when I flew into Heathrow TMA, and I was expecting to have the book thrown at me, they were utterly reasonable. And because that was there was no excuse for that. That was just absolutely poor airmanship. And I said that in my report that I submitted to the CAA. I said it was multiple failures on my part. I even dismissed the Sky Demon controlled airspace warning because there were too many warnings coming up, and I stopped paying attention to the warnings. Solent Class D in a 172 in 2017, a letter, slap wrist, don't do it again. Heathrow TMA Class A airspace in 2020, airspace infringement awareness course that was incredibly valuable and powerful. Everybody should do it anyway, I think. I wish I had known what I learnt from that course beforehand. And number 3, ATZ infringement, something I wasn't aware was a thing. And I wonder whether that's because I've just been a private pilot for 10 years and haven't done any refresher training of any kind. I don't remember learning about that back in those days. And the CAA on this occasion has asked me to complete some retraining, which I think is utterly reasonable and fair because lack of training, for whatever reason, led to my 3rd airspace infringement.
We're here. In we go. Been here half an hour now and so far no actual training at all. I don't really know what to say about this morning's ground school training. The instructor I had there's nothing wrong with him at all, but he was an instructor that's normally training students to get their PPL or do specific ratings. And I showed him the video of the infringing flight and the precise moment, and we went through it carefully. And he said, okay, so you just transited Bournemouth Class D, you had and actually he even heard Bournemouth telling me to free call en route whilst I was inside Little Solent ATZ. And I explained to him that I'm always the first one to try and understand why I've made a mistake or how I made a mistake. And I explained to him that it was just simple ignorance about the rules around ATZs as opposed to Class A, B, C or D or G airspace. And the only question I had from him, he actually had to pull out the Skyway code to look up the answer, and it wasn't even clear in there. My answer was, if you call the ground radio of an ATZ and you don't get a response, can you still make a blind call and transit if you can see that there's no danger, you're well above circuit height? And the Skyway code said it's quite common to transit ATZs if you're well above circuit height, but always state your intentions. Kind of ironically, the one piece of the rules that I wanted to get clarity on, which was relevant to my infringement, I still don't know the rules. But we did spend some time doing some old-fashioned manual pilot log preparation and flight planning for a dead reckoning navigation exercise we'll be doing without any GPS devices or move map devices, just a good old-fashioned chart and plog and stopwatch. And I'm looking forward to doing that, although they are requiring that the CAA specifically authorises them to carry out the training in my aircraft. The owner of the flight school seems to be very anxious about some kind of FAA ramp check or something, I don't know. I've got all the aircraft documents that are necessary, and my insurance states that it covers me for advanced instruction. But he wants a specific personal from someone who's the head of the CAA, head of this matter at the CAA. So some hoops to jump through and some paperwork to do, but onwards and upwards.
I hope that's helpful. Any of you thinking that I'm an idiot for infringing airspace? Yeah. Anyway, thank you for watching. Put any questions or comments below. I hope this helps other pilots learn from my mistakes. I really encourage you to do the GASCO Airspace Infringement Awareness course. Money well spent, and I wish I'd done it sooner. Thanks for watching, guys. See you on the next one. Bye-bye.
And don't forget to subscribe.